those of you that aren't familiar with Eagle in general, I'll just kind of do a little elevator pitch here at the beginning. We are a full service integrator or value added reseller for the data center, right? That means we think that we're good at compute, storage, virtualization, business continuity, security, DR, application, delivery, backups, you get it. We also help folks understand how and when to position public cloud and where to put their data, how to have that hybrid cloud mentality, and we do some managed services as well. Just to be clear, what I think makes us different is that we have a heavy engineering focus. We're like 80% engineers at Eagle. We have a best of breed mentality as well. That's actually a nice tie into our topic today of due diligence before I hand it over to James. But we go out there and we find out what we think are the best products, and then we represent them. We don't do add to cart style stuff. We don't try to sell 70 products. I think this is all around a better mousetrap. I think it makes us unique. But why don't I go ahead and just get into the Eagle portion so we can get on to James sooner. So I talked last week about credibility and how really us earning your trust is something that we've been focusing on for 39 years, and it's something that we talk about daily. We are even architected so that we continue to earn your trust. What I mean by that is the company is owned by engineers. We kind of run the show. Our account execs don't actually have quarterly numbers, like they don't have false reasons to influence or to do anything other than do what's best for the customer. And most importantly, all the engineers, we are not at all measured by our ability to sell stuff. We're measured by our ability to do what's right for the customer. I talked about this last week, but Anthony and I can talk about products that we don't represent if we think they're better for the customer. We can talk you out of buying stuff if we truly believe that there's better options out there. I used to be a customer of Eagle, and that's what I always liked about Eagle. And I think being able to just speak freely in meetings and do what's best for the customers, why folks like Anthony and I really like working at Eagle. So today's topic about due diligence, I'm just going to talk for a minute or two. What I wanted to cover is really that since we are a best of breed shop and we don't want to go out there and represent everything, you factor that along with the fact that technology moves so fast, and we spend a lot of time performing product due diligence. We actually want to go out there and make sure that we are representing the best product for every vertical or every type of solution, right? So the problem with that, to be blunt, is that most vendors nowadays, they all talk the same. They do something called outcomes-based marketing. So they tell you that they understand what your problems are, which are pretty well established in IT, and then they tell you they solve them. So the problem with that, of course, is that they're not talking about architecture. The devil is still in the details. And so we often joke internally at Eagle that what differentiates vendor presentations nowadays is the color of their marketing, right? Because they all speak and talk the same way. So we spend a lot of time trying to figure out what products are better for our customer, what makes them unique, are they transformative, are they going to provide better outcomes? So just a quick example of what that means in the process that we follow. And I just want to reiterate, we are constantly evaluating multiple products and we are at multiple stages in this process. First thing we do, got ahead of myself, is we listen. I know it sounds silly, but Anthony and I like to talk. So the first thing we want to do is hear someone pitch their solution to us. We try to keep our mouth shut. We try to let them dig their own grave or impress us. If we like what we hear, we do multiple meetings. We keep digging deeper and deeper, right? Trying to understand the product. If we like what we're hearing, we want to understand company direction. Do they plan on being around in a couple of years? Is this a product that's going to have a long life cycle, right? We prefer to talk to the founders. Otherwise, we'll talk to product development. We then meet internally and we try to poke holes in the architecture. Okay, is this really better than what our customers are doing right now? Is this going to take more time or is it going to take less time, right? We'll go back and do more deep dives if we need to. We then do investigation, and what I mean by that is not what James did when he was at the FBI. We go outside of that company. We do reference calls. We do competitive analysis. We'll give other vendors opportunity to tell us why maybe they're better. Maybe we found something really cool in the industry, but we actually found the second best product, right? So we're going to go out and see if there's something better. We also try to look at their financials, especially if they're a startup company. We want to make sure they got enough runway to hit that ultimate goal or vision. This is the fun part. We rarely get to this part. I've never done stats, but I think Anthony would agree that probably 3/4 of the things we look at don't even make it to step 3, let alone step 5. But we want to get our hands on the product. On average, we test products in-house in our labs or in our data centers for about 6 to 12 months. One of my favorite examples is Nimble Storage. We've been representing them for a long time. We tested that product for 12 months before we ever talked to a customer about it because it was transformative and it was different, and we wanted to make sure that it worked. Now, step 6 is probably what takes the most time for Eagle. If we meet internally and we don't have any red flags and we're truly impressed by a product, we actually now, Anthony and I have to be prepared to speak to that product, to architect that product. We have to get our installers comfortable installing that product, and then our support team has to be able to support that product. The other thing that we do that's really important is the vast majority of our core products we've adopted for our own use. So we will use them in our own business processes. We will use them in our managed services. And Anthony and the rest of the engineers stay really involved. We do a lot of ongoing product development and customer like conversations with our vendors, giving them feedback. And this gives us a really great feedback loop because we know how the product works.
An HPE thing. And first of all, a little bit of my background. I did 22 years in the FBI working cybercrime the last 8. And I've been an IT person for 30 plus years. I was 8 years military prior to that, worked as an engineer, Lockheed Martin, was a Unix system administrator. So kind of been in the IT field and kind of danced around it for a long time. I have an engineering degree, computer engineering side, as well as an MBA. And so that's kind of my world that I've come out of. But what I did in my last 3 years in the FBI was really getting more focused on cybersecurity and how that affects industry around the world. I'm out of Houston. In Houston, of course, did a lot of oil and gas side of things, petrochemical, energy production, but also SMB. In the small and medium businesses and the municipalities are hugely targeted by current cyber threats. I think what we've seen is statistically, it's somewhere about 60 to 70% of cybercrime is affecting small and medium businesses. When I talk to people out there, they're always like, "Oh, well, why would somebody target me? I don't make that much money." But it really is about the fact that in America, what you say isn't much money is a ton of money in a lot of these countries around the world. And so cybercrime really has become this differentiator. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. Part of the HPE messaging, though, is that where we're seeing everything go in the world, and it's kind of interesting because COVID has really shown us the need to get more focused on some of these same ideas. The edge, everything's pushing closer and closer to the edge. 75% of our data by 2022 will be outside of our normal data centers. And when we talked about data at the edge, we always talked about it more from we thought that it was going to be more customer data at the edge and not as much employee data. But now as our customers now as our employees are working more from home, it's going to be an interesting model to see whether that continues on after the COVID pandemic kind of slows down, and maybe hopefully goes away. I think statistically 10 to 15% of employees worked more than 50% of their time at home prior to this. Of course, right now the numbers are in the 60, 70%. And I think we're going to see it settle down into about a 30 to 35%. So a lot of you out there, your IT infrastructure is going to have to change based upon that. And so when I was a Novell engineer back in the day, and I did Windows 2000 when it first came out, as we went out of NT 4.0 and stuff. And we all built our networks in sort of that same way. It was this north-south idea where all of our data flowed up through the backbone switches, flowed out through a firewall, and all of our services were sort of outside of our network. Now our networks are changing because of the cloud. And our data are flattening out, our networks are flattening out, and we're actually pushing data more east-west than we were before. Statistically, I think it's 175 zettabytes of data by 2025, and most of that, 70% or so, will be east-west traffic. So cloud-enabled, edge-centric, and data-driven. Our data, and when we talk about data, we always try to separate, it's not just data, it's information. The information that you have becomes more and more important. a great example of that is some of the social media platforms, and the fact that they're using data that they take from customers and marketing it. Um, a lot more customers are getting into that same idea of changing the way they use data, and finding other ways to sort of make money off of it. And so this is that what I was saying, 75% of our data will be created outside of that traditional data center. Um, that data might be created, in the more traditional way of, somebody entering data, through a tablet or a laptop, or it could be IoT data. And what's interesting in this COVID world is that what we're seeing right now is actually the largest phishing and scam operations we've ever seen at any point in time. And so criminals are looking at this as an opportunity to take advantage of a crisis. I mean, we've always said that criminals are their idea is that if I can catch people that are distracted, catch people that are somewhat compromised, I have an opportunity to make money off of it. Here in Houston, we had a tropical storm, Imelda came through here about 2 years ago, I guess now. And right after that, East Texas got hit really hard by that. The areas of Beaumont, Port Arthur, and Orange, kind of on the eastern border. And right after that, we saw this huge increase in ransomware attacks directed against companies that were in those municipalities, in those areas. And what ended up happening is the bad guy looked at at those areas, pulled zip codes out of the area, and then actually was starting to hit companies that match those zip codes. So as criminals get more organized, they are starting to actually do more targeting, and they're actually starting to say, you know what, this is a great place to hit. There are indications that Australia, with the fires in Australia, we saw an increase in that, and not just targeting like Australia, but think about it, we saw more of these people looking to get money and do fundraisers and stuff like that, and those kind of scams will increase, and they start targeting companies as well. So it's just that as our data pushes to the edge, and as we start creating this data, it actually creates more and more of a security vulnerability, because wherever the data is, the security has to be, right? So think about it now is I was talking to one company recently, and over the COVID thing, and I said, okay, so where are you? And they said, we actually had to take our DR site, our colo site, and crank up those servers and bring them on full time to handle the additional people that were logging into our network. Most of our networks weren't designed around this level of remote working. So we were looking for anything we could do to to bring that in. Well, the bad guy knows that as well. So if they get any sort of idea that your colo service is being used, they're going to try to hit you. They're going to try to take it out on you, because they know that you're somewhat compromised, and you may be more likely to pay those ransoms. The other idea with that is that what if what kind of infrastructure are you using to support your remote users? Are they VPN tunnels? Do you have a Citrix gateway? We've seen an actual increase in denial of service attacks against the front end of people's networks. So if I can hit your front end with enough, a DDoS attack, I can actually jam your network up. And are you going to pay me to get that data back? And that answer is going to be sort of this business decision that goes forward. So I talked about this with cloud computing, cloud is part of it. We're seeing a lot more security. Companies, we're always looking at, okay, I want to go to the cloud, but if I go to the cloud, what do I get? And so that's an idea. So we've always said, with the kind of the one thing, and this is my job coming into HPE, was to create this more of a holistic security approach. And I liked that messaging from Eagle coming into it, because number one, cybersecurity, requires us to look at not any particular product. We have a responsibility with HPE and Eagle. I think, like I said, I love the messaging, is we need to help you solve your problem. Every network is different. Everything you're trying to do is somewhat different, and your solution has to be individualized to what you're doing, because data is the currency. Your information is the currency, and from a criminal standpoint, from cybersecurity, the loss of function is the weapon. So, what are your new vulnerabilities? What is your next IT transformation? I often tell people that this COVID is an unplanned IT transformation. We didn't have this on our roadmap, but because of it, a lot of companies will be changing business models going forward. I think you're going to see huge changes in like the travel industry when we talk about airlines, but travel agents and the cruise lines are going to change the way they do business in order to protect themselves against something like this in the future. Small and medium businesses. I was talking to one restaurateur around the area that I ordered from, and I said, "So do you use Grubhub?" And he said, "Well, I did use Grubhub prior to this, but Grubhub charges me. They have a fee, and since only about 10% of my business prior to this was coming through my ordering business, it did make a big deal. But now that 60 or 70% of my business is coming through deliveries with Grubhub, I have to rethink how I'm going to start doing deliveries. And I think you may see some of that. And I was sitting down talking to someone else also. I said, so think about grocery stores. 3 years ago, if this had happened 3 years ago, what would the grocery stores have done? Many grocery stores didn't have delivery. A lot of grocery stores didn't have. There's a hand raised there. A lot of grocery stores didn't have curbside, services. So it's interesting to see that we've kind of gotten to this place now. But where would we have been before? And I think there's going to be a continued transformation and some lessons learned as we go forward on this too. Intruder detection. I think this statistic is a little low, but I think it's conservative. 145 days that they're inside your network without being detected. On my blog recently, I said, so where are we going to be in 6 months? I have an anticipation, somewhat morbid, but in 6 months, a lot of companies are going to find out that during this COVID virus, their networks were intruded upon, and they've now have somebody inside their network that they didn't want. So I think that's going to be an issue we look at too. Is we have to start having an understanding of how am I going to detect the intruders and get them out. The faster I can get them out of my network, the less damage they do. Statistically, it comes down to about $20,000 per day of an attack. Or another way you could manage or try to figure out what your loss would be should something happen, it's $143 per record lost. So you can look through your databases or something, look at what your records would be, and get an idea as to what would be your loss should something happen to you. Ransomware now is also a data breach. A lot of companies were hit with ransomware. They figured they handled it locally, and they didn't report it based upon data breach mechanisms. But that's changing. And a lot of states are changing their breach notification laws to actually say that if you suffer ransomware, it is a breach. What's also happening is that the ransomeers are stealing data at the same time, and then so you get hit with the ransomware. You're like, okay, do I pay the ransom? Do I not pay the ransom? You're making that business decision, but even after that, after you've resolved the ransomware, the question comes up of they recontact you and say, oh, by the way, I stole your data too. Do you want to pay me another fee in order to prevent that data from being put out on a public site? It's about reputational loss. It was a very interesting thing recently where one of the major casinos out in Las Vegas, they had suffered a breach about a year ago, and they thought they were cool. They thought nothing had happened. They kind of weathered the storm, and then a year after that breach, the criminals actually posted the data on their customers on a public site in order to cause a reputational loss. It's not very well revealed, but it's very well thought that there was a conversation going on throughout this time between the criminals and that casino, trying to get money out of the casino to prevent that happening. And so it's interesting that that's where the criminals are going. So we have to be aware of that. That's just our reality now. All right. So, cloud attacks, we've seen a lot of, very effective attacks across the industries. That's going to be a continuing thing. The criminals are going to target the areas where your data is stored. So have an understanding of that the criminals are looking at where your data is stored or where you are aggregating any sort of service. So MSPs, MSSPs. We had a bunch of municipalities here in East Texas that got hit, and it ended up through the investigation, we realized that it was through a managed service provider that they had lost their administrator rights, and then the criminals were able to get into that MSP and send that ransomware out through all of those activities. So it's really, really crucially important to make sure that who you're doing business with is staying secure as well. Cybercrime is rising at an exponential rate. I don't have to necessarily beat you up with that. $2 trillion is estimated in 2019. Some people say it'll be $6 trillion by next year. It's going to continue to be that way because after the Target attack of 2013, criminals saw that there was an ability to make money online. They saw that the way that I could do it is simply phishing. And I can get past, I don't care what firewall you have. I don't care what, that wall that you have established. I have an opportunity. I can just phish your people. I can socially engineer your people, gain access, and then do what I want to do if you don't have some sort of internal security mechanism. So it's becoming more and more critical to look at what am I doing to detect that data inside, because human error is going to be probably your weakest link. That's why with COVID right now, the weakest link is the fact that you have people now working from home, and they're working from home on computers and laptops that are not yours. They're not controlled by you. And so if you can't get some sort of endpoint protection, or you don't have some sort of ability to sniff that traffic as it comes in, that's the weak link. And we're going to continue to see that. That's just the nature of it. So I'm not sure if this is, I'm looking at this slide deck and I'm not feeling like this is the right one here. Hold on a second. I'm going to switch my slides. Yeah.
I'm loving it so far. Yeah.
Okay.
So
cool. Okay. So if y'all are cool with it, we'll keep rolling. I can talk about whatever. It's all right. Y'all still see those?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. All right. So when we look at the cloud, these are the things we really consider when we're looking at the cloud. Number one, user doesn't, have somebody's using the data, right? Data violation, inadequate protections. What happens a lot of times in cloud environments is that we go out there and we say, I want, 2 petabytes of data, and a cloud provider is going to say, okay, fine, I'm giving you 2 petabytes of data. I'm going to deploy it. But if there's not a proper conversation between you and that company, there's not going to be a lot of security built into that particular model. So, a lot of cloud environments are based upon, it's kind of a cafeteria style thing where you have to go in and you have to say, well, I want encryption and I want, access controls and I want all of these things. But if you don't know about it, it feels like you're playing, sometimes you might be playing poker against somebody and they're holding their cards really close to their chest and you're playing this kind of a game. So it's very, very important to make sure that when you start going into cloud environments, that you have somebody on your side kind of working, to make sure you're having the right conversations. I often equate it to that commercial. It's like an insurance commercial where this person takes their insurance agent, I think it's Flow or something, and they go out in the middle of wherever. And there's this person, and they start talking to this person and says, yes, they're speaking insurance. It's really the same idea with cloud. You got to make sure you have somebody that's able to talk the right cloud, having a security consultant or something on your side that's saying, hey, I want to make sure we're doing the right thing, because it's infinitely, here's what happens. In almost every cloud breach, and I can say probably 80% of them, and that's just off the top of my head, it comes out as a misconfigured server. It's not misconfigured. It was configured the way that the conversation went. And so it's very, very important to make sure we're doing that. So I beat that one up pretty good because I think that's probably the greatest problem we see is the inadequate protection. I have a lot of friends. I grew up so I'll give you my age here. I grew up in the War Games days. 1983, I think, is when that came out. And a lot of my friends, some of my friends became hackers, I guess, in the late 80s, early 90s. And I've had a lot of conversations with these guys because they've sort of tried to shape their life up. They call them gray hat hackers. And in it, they said, you know what? The one thing if people did that would be the greatest security was to have some sort of encryption mechanism for their data out there in the cloud or out there on their public networks. So it really does come down to just sometimes doesn't require a lot of technology, but it just requires to first identify what is important to you as a company and making sure you're secure. Unsecured APIs and interfaces. So you're out there on the cloud and you get a cloud space and they give you an API. Well, couldn't a criminal do the same thing? And that's absolutely the case we've seen. is that some people, the criminals will go out there on a cloud provider and they will get the same API. And if the API is weak or if it's, unsecured, they can find ways to use that API to access other people's, data. So security spending, I want to kind of step back to that, is that the problem is that as cybercrime continues to rise at the exponential rate, our spending is staying flat. And because of this flat spending, we have to make sure that we're spending our money correctly. Next. Next slide.
Boom.
Okay, cool. So what's ended up happening was that 10 years ago when we were buying products for our networks, we were really focused on perimeter control. You can kind of see that midway through this slide. We were buying really high-end firewalls. We were buying really, high-end border routers. But what's happened is over time is that really hasn't shown a lot of value in securing our networks. Even things like data loss prevention, deployment of governance, risk, and compliance at an enterprise level. Those things, even encryption, doesn't have as much of a security value as things like intelligence systems, machine learning, user behavior analytics, identity and access. So it's really crucially important to not fall into the idea, I call it the shiny light syndrome, where we start saying, ooh, RSA is the worst for that. You go out to RSA and everybody's selling a product and they're all pumping what they think is the greatest product and it's gonna make you the most secure. And some of them are great, don't get me wrong. But it's very, very important to make sure that whatever you are trying to do, you are securing it the right way. I'm a big proponent of user-based analytics, of intelligence systems, and using those, using their AI to help me secure my data. For example, right now you have a user that is logging in from a home network. Well, so how do you trust that network? How do you trust their login? What if they come into work? Do you trust them more or less if they're actually sitting in work? If you're sitting at work, you would think that you'd feel more secure. Well, let's put it the other way. What if I took that same laptop that I was logging in from home and I actually went to a public site like a hotel or to the airport? Is that more or less secure from a corporate data standpoint? Contextual awareness of where my users are is something that can be built into security, and I think it's a very, very good idea to look at it and deploy it in the right way. Next, please. So, obviously, can a threat be mitigated through innovation? The answer we would always say is absolutely. I work for a technology company, and I think what Brian said before is absolutely spot on. We have a responsibility from technology companies, whether it's HPE, whether it's Eagle, to give you the solution that works for you. Now, that may seem somewhat counterintuitive because we want to sell our product. And absolutely, I believe that HPE has a lot of great products, but we're not the only product in line. And so what HPE has continued to do over the last years is to build partnerships with other companies, whether it's companies like Eagle or whether it's other technology companies. So user-based analytics. HPE no longer offers a user-based analytics platform. So what we've done instead is we now have the ability to plug in through APIs into external data sources or data technology. And I'll give you some of that as well. But innovation can help mitigate the threat. The threat is never, ever going to go away 100%. We have to accept that. Because of how much money is being made through cybercrime, that threat will continue to grow. It'll continue to grow up until the time we make it financially no longer making money for the bad guy, right? If they're continuing to make money and they don't have to put a lot of money into it, they're going to continue to do that. Here's how easy it is right now. I can go out on the dark web and I can buy 100,000 email addresses for $100. I can find that right now. People are buying for pennies. They're buying people's accounts. But let's say I can buy 100,000 email addresses for $100, and that's fluid. Then I can go onto another place on the dark web and I can rent ransomware. I don't even need to know ransomware anymore. I can rent it, and it's ransomware as a service on the dark web, and they will send me a link that will then allow me to send that link, embed that link within a document, embed that link within another link, and deploy that to those 100,000 email addresses. I send it out to 100,000 people, 5% click. And that's a low number. 5,000 people click, And of those 5,000 people, 1,000 people, 5%, so 1% of my people pay me a ransom of $400. And that's all low. I've made $400,000. I pay 40% to my bad guy, the ransomier, and my take home is $240,000 on a $100 investment. The financial, there's way too much money to be made in the ransomware and in the criminal activity. So what we have to do is start saying, how do I make myself more secure? How do I make myself less of a target? And I think that's where innovation comes in. Next, please. So, security architecture. The columns on the left is where we've always spent so much of our time: people, processes, policy, products, and proof. But security is way more than that. It's physical security. There's a threat group, or not a threat group. They are a penetration testing company here in Houston that has a person, she can get into any data center. I have not seen her fail yet. She can sweet talk her way past all of your guards and get right into physical access into your servers. And the rule of thumb is, if I can get physical access to your server, I win. Period. End of game, right? So when we're talking about testing security and our security overall as a posture, it has to be, first of all, it has to be a culture. Security is a culture. So I need to, make sure that not only are the things on the left good, but everything else is stacked up on top of it, and I'm testing it. So I'm a big proponent of getting penetration tests done and getting, those kind of, it's just amazing to me that we have to, and I'll tell you a story, Robbie. I saw your story about she walked up to the front and she said, "I'm here for the fire testing company," and she wore this. She was wearing a dress, but she was also wearing this little thing saying that she worked for a fire fire extinguishers. And she said, I need to go look at your server room because somebody opened a ticket to look at your to look at the closet. Literally, they walked her right into the closet and left her there. They left her in there on the data closet while she was in there. And she's like, seriously? Another case is, I was working a case where a company was generating software for a part of infrastructure in the United States, and they'd been hit with ransomware. And I went to visit the company, and I walked up to their front desk, and there's no one there. Looking around. Okay, I'm in a suit. I'm in the typical bureau suit. And it's like, okay, we're going to act like I own the place. So I walk through an open door on the right side, and it's a break room. And there's a guy sitting there, and he looks at me, and I look at him, and I'm like, how are you doing? And he says, how are you doing? And we just keep on walking through, walk into the next room. It's a work center. No one's there. And there's an open door into the data closet. I'm literally standing by their data closet. I have the whole rack at my disposal. I call their chief security officer and I say, hey, by the way, I'm here. He goes, where are you? I said, right now my hand is on the power button to your entire server closet. Oh, no one ever challenged me. So physical security has to be something that we look at, and just having an awareness of that. So next slide, please.
Hey, James, you got about 15 minutes, just FYI, if we're going to do the Kahoot game.
Got it. All right, so here's where HPEs come in. We worked through with Intel on this particular idea. Number one, how do I protect my data? Data exists in 3 states, if you want to get into the state thing: at rest, in flight, or in use. So we have to make sure that we can protect it in all 3 of those states, but at the same time, we want to make sure we're securing the platform, right? Can you trust my platform? Can you trust the data that comes off that platform? Do you have the ability to control and secure that platform? And is that platform resilient against attacks? But I have to do all of this without compromising your performance. Think about a couple of years ago when Intel put out a patch for the meltdown Spectre attacks. What did they end up doing? When you put that patch on those processors, it turned those processors into really, really slow bricks. And everybody removed that patch. If I'm trying to generate security and that security makes your system run slower, you won't use it. In the good old days, people used to disable their antivirus because they figured it was actually slowing down their computer. So whatever we're doing from a security standpoint has to do that without compromising performance. Next, please. So security is only as strong as the layer below it. So the other thing we've looked at is that most security products from an HPE standpoint always are at the apps, OS, and the VM level, but we're not seeing a whole lot of security built into the hypervisor, the BIOS firmware, and the CPU. If you don't think people are attacking those firmware and the CPU levels, I got some news for you. we have seen a number of attacks where ransomware is trying to get into the IoT environments and the OT environments, and in firmware is the grand target. So HPE said, what if I need to make sure that I can secure all of that, and then I build security up through the stack? And so what we've done is we've created a chain of trust from CPU up. Next, please. So zero trust, right? We've all seen the idea of zero trust. A firewall is part of the network. I'm at no point ever saying we don't want firewalls. But what we also look at is we want to be able to secure the data on every server from the hardware through the firmware, through the OS and the apps. And then from there, we push that security out to the edge, right? So now what if we have multiple data centers, and what if I could tie the security of my server to the security of another server in a remote location? And so this is where we've been working, to get to, is not just hardware security localized, but hardware security that can then be propagated across. Next, please. So the difference that we have is that what HPE does, it writes its own firmware. That firmware, a fingerprint, a hash of that firmware is taken at the creation of that server, and that firmware signature is written into a silicon, a custom HPE chip on the hardware. And then what happens is we go through the normal boot process. We check that firmware over and over and over again to make sure that nothing has been modified. We compare that against the BIOS, and the BIOS firmware is compared. We do it all the way up to the bootloader. So what ends up happening is at boot time, we check it a number of times and make sure that every step is still secure. Now the Intel boot guard on the left is it does the processor firmware check, and then it checks up, make sure that the BIOS matches, the firmware matches into the bootloader, but it only does that at boot. And no other product not only does it at boot, but HPE also does it at runtime. So we've got, our product will also continue through our ILO software. We will actually check the firmware and the bootloader throughout the day, and it's tunable. I think the default's 24 hours, but you can tune it down to whatever you want. And so if it finds something inside that firmware, inside that BIOS that doesn't match, it can either automatically recover to the last known good, or it can flag it to you and then allow you as a user to make your decision. And we think that's one thing that really differentiates us, because it actually takes our firmware and makes sure that nothing can get into it and get persistence. Next, please. So we talk about the security dashboard, the ILO security dashboard. So we have 8 security settings that are checked at all times, right? So what the firmware scan, secure boot, authentication failure, all of these things are checked, and it gives you the status for all of your servers. Security management is always a pain, right? And especially when we get into things like what firmware rev are my servers on? I don't know half the time. I mean, I'm not sure where I'm at. So it's really, really important to make sure that we have an automated product that can do that for me the whole way. Next, please. What about secure erasing? I want to make sure that when my server is done, that all the data is gone from it. And so another product that we added in is the ability to do a secure erase. Next. And through that, we also use a thing called InfoSight. And InfoSight's a network analytic product that will take data analytics from the server. This was actually designed into our backup products originally. And so it takes all of those, takes a lot of that remote activity on the network and then gives us alerts. Statistically, this is shown to reduce the number of tickets opened by like 60 to 70%. So think about it from your server, for example, one of your hard drives starts to fail. So if it's a older platter style, or if it's a platter style drive and the RPM start dropping off, you start getting warnings. Well, instead what happens is that InfoSight can automatically detect the failure and actually send out for a new hard drive that will come in, and all you have to do is swap it out. So it's got a lot of really great features like that. The firmware driver updates. I can do automatic firmware and updates, stuff like that, or at least notifications, so that you can figure out how you want to handle that going forward. Next, please.
Yeah, I'll just add that we have an entire presentation in a couple of weeks just on this one topic, InfoSight for servers. Yep. It's really interesting.
Yeah, InfoSight's come a long, long way. It's a great product, but it's every year it kind of adds another feature to it. So when you're looking at implementing a silicon root of trust, so we look at the Gen 10 servers. Right now it's offered in these products, the Proliant, Synergy, Apollo, SimpliVity. SimpliVity is a great product too. It has some very interesting recovery processes that have actually shown it to be great in a ransomware environment. Go online, you can take a look at some cities, some municipalities that got hit with ransomware, and SimpliVity was really the key to recovering from them. ILO Advanced, right now, ILO Advanced, I think it's free through the end of the year as part of the COVID, crisis, and then go on through, and then we'll talk about Cyber Catalyst here at the end. Next, please. So we feel this is actually a testing done outside of HPE. We had a third party test our servers against other servers. There is no product out there that has all of these things, across the line, and we think that really does differentiate us from others. Next. Also, we have ClearPass. A lot of people don't recognize that Aruba is actually part of HPE now. And so our Aruba product and ClearPass plugs into our other product lines and gives us the ability to get visibility, authentication across the entire network. Shadow IT is a huge monster for companies. A lot of people out there have that issue. So what we want to do is make sure that we can, when somebody plugs something in, the ClearPass plugs into our zero trust model as well. If I plug in a particular device, I should give it an implicit deny. I don't want that new product having any access to anything outside of my, my network. So I deny it until I authorize and I authenticate it, and then I can actually trigger responses based on that. Next. So we kind of talked about that. These are some features for the Gen 10 recognized by the cyber insurance industry. Next.
Yeah, we're batting a bit of cleanup here. Here's some new content.
So Pensando. This is a great product coming forward. Pensando is a company that was established last year by John Chambers, former CEO of Cisco. And in this, this is a product that will take a full firewall and put it into a network card. This is something that's been tried before, but we believe that this product, as it goes forward, is going to have a huge impact on the industry, because now you can take this network card, put it in all of our Gen 10 servers, and it will actually provide security and a firewall, microsegmentation, and encryption from server to server. So this is what ties us together between, for our server products. And we've formed a huge partnership with Pensando, and I think you're going to hear a lot more from them, to come. Next, please.
Yeah, we dropped that in just because I think a lot of folks haven't heard about it, and you're going to start to hear more about it.
I think, and I think the first version of that is dropping this quarter, maybe June. Might be June that the first version of this product is dropping. So in addition,
that's what I remember hearing as well. It was June, July timeframe. So
yeah, I want to say June, July is version 1 of the Pensando card. So in addition, HPE's worked with the insurance industry, and Marsh Insurance took a look at products and said, are there certain products that if you deploy them in your network, they will actually have a meaningful impact on cyber risk? Next, please. And so what Marsh did, back one.
Sorry, there you go.
No, it's cool. So what Marsh did was Marsh asked a whole lot of vendors out there to submit their products for evaluation, and 150 products were evaluated in 2019. And of those 150 products, only 17 of them were designated as cyber catalysts. These are products that Marsh believes will actually help reduce cyber risk. And on the right side there, you can see the HPE Silicon Root of Trust. We are the only server that has this designation through Marsh Insurance, and we believe that's another differentiator. In addition, you can see the policy enforcement firewall from Aruba at the top, which is a key part of their zero trust model. And so through that, if you deploy HPE products in the majority in your network, that's kind of the rule they say. So if you have more than 51% of servers that are Gen 10 servers or better, they will give you a positive, or they have a term for it. It's a positive on your cyber risk, and they will give you enhanced terms and conditions. That's the term that the insurance company uses. And we believe that it will actually have an impact on your cyber insurance policy. Next. So we are trying to generate this holistic approach to security. This is where HPE, and that's one of my jobs with HPE, is to make sure that we're looking at security across the entire platform. Every product we have has security built in. It's not security that's bolted on. And in addition to that, not only from a hardware standpoint, but we're forming partnerships and relationships with other companies to make sure that they're also, or saying, hey, we think you're doing positive things in that in cybersecurity. Why don't we work together and make it a better product?